Great. We are just going to focus on marriage today, just for this bit of information. I just want to focus on three things or outline three things that I think are critical when it comes to determining how sustainable your marriage is or your marriage will be. The one is, are you going into it with divorce as an option? The second thing is, do you want to be married or do you want to be right? Which one is it? And are you going into this marriage as an ally or an antagonist? So if we look at the first one, is divorce an option? My belief is that if you look at divorce as an option, then that person is an option. And so then it becomes an option on how you're going to treat that person. You're not focused on being the best mate that you can be for that person because it's an option. Where, you get up one day, it's an option to treat that person nicely. It's an option to treat that person not so nicely. I think if you look at divorce as an option, then it sets the tone for all other areas of your marriage. But if you go into it, and not just one person, but both people have to have this mentality that divorce is not an option, then you're more focused on doing those things that will nurture the marriage. Every day has to be about nurturing the marriage. My husband and I have been married to each other 23 years, it will be. And one of the primary factors for us is that we went into it saying divorce was not an option. But I think the only reason we've been able to uphold that is because we are Christ-centered. He's not focused on doing what's right by me. I'm not focused on doing what's right by him. We are both focused on doing what's right by Christ. And when we offend the word of God and what he would have us to do, then we know we are out of line in the marriage. So that has been the thread that has held us together. And we have not done everything right by any means. But with that as our guide, I think we've been a lot more successful than we would have been had we not been Christ-centered. And we knew that God did not want divorce for the two of us. He condones divorce? No, excuse me. He permits it. He does not condone it. So we did not want to get into a predicament where we had to go to God and ask for permission to get a divorce based on some things that we did that were out of line with the Word of God. So is divorce an option? And if you are dating someone and they tell you that divorce is an option, then you just need to backtrack. The both of you need to backtrack and really look at what you're doing in terms of that marriage. Now, let me point out, remember when I said that God permits divorce, he doesn't necessarily condone it. There are some things that we will look at in terms of, and not just for the purpose of August accountability, but just to look at in terms of marriage. There are deal breakers, especially if that person does not have a heart for change. We're talking about infidelity, mismanagement of the household, addiction, which can destroy a family, abuse, things like that. When this person continues to engage in that behavior, you have to look at it and say, do they really have a heart for change? Are they really focused on what God would have for their lives, or are they stuck in the flesh? And then that's a totally different area that we would have to look at in terms of divorce. Okay, so the next area when you talk about being married, I told people, or I've been telling people for years, is that I want to be married more than I want to be right. Now, a lot of people look at me cross-eyed, especially those that know me, because I do have a very antagonistic disposition, if you will, meaning that I question everything. I don't take things at face value. I'm an inquisitive person. My uncle told me that when I was little because I said, I'm just nosy, uncle. He said, no, baby, you're inquisitive. And I thought that was so sweet of him and encouraging of him. So I really appreciate that. But I am an inquisitive person. So if something is questionable, then I am going to question it. Or if I don't like something, then I am going to point it out. So with my husband and I, we've taken a stance of we want to be married more than we want to be right. So it's not so much about winning an argument. It's about letting that other person know what you're thinking and how you're feeling, and then backing up and allowing them to make some adjustments, if you will. Or if they're going to continue in their behavior, then you sit down and say, okay, well, what will this mean if we continue in this offensive behavior with the other person? But a lot of times, people that I've talked to over the years, they weren't necessarily arguing about deal breakers. It was just little stuff. And that's where do you want to be married more than you want to be right really comes into play, and it's helpful. It's that little stuff that really wouldn't matter in 10 years, but you feel the need to say something about it anyway. The last area in terms of marriage development that I normally cover with couples are you an ally or an antagonist? When couples come in, they're often wanting to rehash arguments that they've had in the past. And I always say, do you really want to do that in here? I want to focus more on what you do to nurture your relationship. And as an ally, you would do those things to kind of resolve conflict rather than to keep it going. So I ask each person to consider what level of accountability do you have in the conflict. And if they continue to point the fingers, I say research shows. Anytime there's conflict, there are two parties that are involved. Not two parties that are involved, but each party has a responsibility. You can't just point the finger at the other person. So you have to look at what your level of accountability is in that situation. But the main thing is to focus on or whether you are an ally or an antagonist. And it is pretty evident by the behavior. Are you doing those things that are constructive or destructive? You want to make sure that you're always constructive. You're always nurturing the relationship, even when you're angry. And I'm going to give you an example of what I tell people, okay? Because I had one guy who just, it was just ugly the way that he did not speak to his wife for, a good little while. He didn't speak to her. And so I said, well, okay, well, let's not talk about your wife anymore. Let's talk about the kids. How do you get along with your kids? He said, wonderful. I love my kids. Okay, so great. And what do you do if your child gets in trouble at school? I give them a consequence or I take their phone. Listen, because I take their phone. Okay, that's great. And how long do you not talk to your child? I don't do that. I don't not talk to my child. I said, surely you do that because you do that to your wife. So surely you do that to your child. And he said, I don't do that. I'm not quiet with my child. I said, and the only reason you're not quiet with your child is because your child is not an option. That's your child regardless. But you're looking at your wife as if she's an option now. And if you're not looking at her like that, you're definitely treating her like that because of this usage of the silent treatment that you have. So do you see the difference in terms of being an ally versus an antagonist? That even though his spouse may have disappointed him, she may have angered him or whatever, she never deserved to be treated like an antagonist. You have to make sure that you treat your spouse like an ally at all times, meaning if they offend you, if they upset you, you come to the table, you talk about what's wrong, and then you figure out how you're going to move forward. Not shut down completely as if they have been ostracized for the family. So I want to make sure that I said something correctly earlier on, that God permits divorce. He does not condone it. I think I got a little twisted up back there. But he permits it, but that's not what he wants for our lives if you get married. So you really want to be careful about who you marry so that you don't get in a situation where you have to ask permission for divorce based on the behaviors by one or more persons in the marriage. So marriage is really close to my heart. I love working with married couples, so I'm really looking forward to your feedback, your inquiries. If you need some help with goal setting in this area, let me know. I'm looking forward to the feedback. Great. Thank you.